Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Working Moms Against Guilt book club. We haven't done one of these in quite some time, and I'm super excited to bring them back because number one, I love books. Number two, I love talking about books. And number three, I really love when I get the chance to actually talk to the author of the book that I'm really excited to read. And so that's why I'm introducing Stephanie Arnold here today. We're going to be talking about her book, 37 Seconds. I have my copy right here. It is the uncorrected proof, which I was telling Stephanie I did not even find any errors. And that's in the uncorrected proof. So that's pretty good as a longtime editor that I did not find any errors in the galley. But I'm sure for certain that they are not in the copies that you would order on Amazon or get from your local bookstore. So I had a chance to read the book, and I also wanted to introduce Monica, who is one of our contributors for WMAG. Thank you for joining tonight, Monica.
Thanks for having me.
Monica has a special experience that she felt pretty connected to the subject matter of this book because you did have a traumatic childbirth as well yourself. And so I wanted Monica to join just because she's going to bring a different perspective. I was fortunate enough to have very uneventful childbirths for both of my children, and I still really related to Stephanie's story, but I just thought Monica would probably benefit and be part of the discussion. So thank you for joining. So I'm just going to read the little nice little teaser on the cover of the book here to kind of get us started and kind of frame up what this book is kind of about. The day my son was born, I died. I had premonitions it was going to happen, but no one believed me. Even more unbelievable is what I would see when I flatlined for 37 seconds, and that is the title of this book. The subtitle, Dying Revealed Heaven's Help. So the first question I want to ask you, Stephanie, is what's been the reaction to the publication of this book by people who either know you or don't know you? Like, what kind of reactions have you been getting?
Well, I will tell you, first of all, thank you for having me. The initial reaction from people who have known me or knew my story or knew me when I would tell them I was going to die before giving birth, they were in shock. I mean, even people that knew my story later, once they read the book, they had no idea. Reading a book in the privacy of your home, reading page by page the panic that I had for 3 months prior to giving birth, people could actually feel the freight train out of control that I felt I was when I was having all these premonitions. The response has been unbelievable. I'm so grateful that I was able to put two words together. What the readers will learn is that I had an amniotic fluid embolism, and it was very severe. It was a full-blown amniotic fluid embolism, which is when amniotic cells get into the mother's bloodstream, and if you happen to be allergic to it, your body goes into somewhat of an anaphylactic shock, and in most cases, women don't make it. And to actually be sitting here putting a sentence together, especially after being in a coma and losing my life momentarily, is miraculous enough as it is. And so the reviewers that have come at it, and this is my first time writing, this is my first time putting pen to paper in this kind of format, they've been incredibly receptive. And you can check out a bunch of the reviews in many places, from CBS to Fox to, I don't know, to even
Working
book group. Yeah, working mothers again. But the moms that are reaching out, and even the pregnant women that are reaching out to me now that have read it, their own sense of foreboding, they're asking me details about what that felt like. And I feel like in my own small way, I'm making a difference to affect maybe how doctors will react, because a patient that's trying to be their own best advocate will take this book or say, nobody believed her, and then ultimately it came true, so maybe you need to listen to me a little differently.
Yeah. I read this book in basically the span of a day. I was traveling, so I was, had some uninterrupted time on an airplane and in an airport and things like that, and then later in a hotel room. But I just could not stop. I couldn't stop reading. It had such an immediacy to it, just, the rush and the visceral feeling of it. It was, I felt like I'm getting chills right now, just thinking about it, actually. Particularly, well, a couple of different points. First of all, the knowing that it's coming, because I think that's very unique about your story, that you kept having these overwhelming premonition, kind of almost like psychic takeovers of your mind, or it was very interesting how you described it. But that was just so intense, and I don't believe I've ever experienced those. Can you talk about, you do describe it pretty amazingly in the book, but can you talk about like what those are like, and also, have you ever had them since the pregnancy?
Yes. So thanks for making me relive those moments all over again, Susan. Sorry, this is not for you, but this is typical mother cutting food and
yeah,
that's great. So what did it feel like? It is, how do I put it? Do you know that feeling that you have when you shake somebody's hand, and it's an intuitive side that you feel in your body that this person's not who they say that they are. Like, I feel that this person is something different. Or I think we've discussed this before, but one way that I also talk about is, when you're about to date that guy and that's not the right guy for you, but yet you still go into that relationship, and a year later after you're in that relationship and it ends, like, I knew I shouldn't have been with him.
But like the way you describe it, though, it's more than just a funny.
Right. So this is
things happening.
Correct. So this was unlike anything I've ever felt before, but it's the only thing that I can compare it to when I give you that kind of basic overall mother's instinct, intuitive side. So at a very superficial level, or maybe a deeper level than that, right? In this particular case, I have had intuitive thoughts before, but when I was younger, half of the time they were wrong. So it wasn't like I could say, hey, I'm an intuitive, or I'm psychic, or I have these feelings, because I didn't know what I was feeling. But this is the first time that it was a sense of foreboding. There was something talking to me. I didn't question where it was coming from, but there was something in my head that was screaming at me, not in words, but in a feeling that I saw myself on an operating table. I saw myself hemorrhage. I saw myself needing a hysterectomy. I saw the baby being fine. I saw them putting me under general anesthesia, and I saw me dead. It was clear as day. And what I felt with each one of the visions I was having, and mind you, this was happening at all times of day, at night, during the day, walking down the street, in the grocery store, any time. So it didn't stop. It was incessant for 3 months. That those feelings, when I'd feel like I was going to hemorrhage in that vision, all of a sudden I lost all the blood in my body, and I lost my balance. So it was a visceral reaction to the visions that I was having.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't ignore it. So either something was really wrong.
It was your body or the spirits.
Absolutely.
You would not let you ignore it.
Absolutely. And I didn't look at it from a spiritual side at that moment. All I thought was, I needed to save my life. There was something going on. And so I saw every doctor. I spoke to every nurse. I had ultrasounds. I had MRIs. I had specialists that I spoke to about needing a hysterectomy. I had so many things, because I was like, maybe somebody has heard this before. Maybe somebody knows what this is. Maybe there's a medical terminology for going crazy, with this type of vision. And maybe after all of these people that I would see, somebody would have an answer, and nobody did.
So, to my second part of the question, have you had anything like this since?
Not a sense of foreboding, but premonitions still keep coming, and they are not the daily of daily frequency like that, but it is dealing with family. And they have the most recent one was about, I guess, 7 or 8 weeks ago. We were at a county fair, and my husband and I and our 3 kids, my stepdaughter was there, and my middle one and Jacob there, and we were with another couple, and the women decided, oh, we'll go get the food, you guys take care of the kids. Okay, fine. We get the drinks, we come back, and as I'm walking away, I got this vision that I felt the exact same way I felt with my others, where it went right down the spine, and it was a chill, and I saw my husband playing the fishing game, where you win the prizes, but you throw the ball into the thing.
Yeah.
That he was playing it with our oldest, and that Adina, the middle, was playing on the ground next to him, and that Jacob was not being paid attention to, and he walked away and he was gone. And right. So I told my girlfriend who I was with, I'm a little nervous about Jacob because I just had the vision. And she said, it's okay. We're just going to go get the pizza and come back. And I said, if I turn around and tell my husband this, he's going to say, relax. Dad's parent different than mom's. Go get the pizza. Right. Yeah. So I go get the pizza and I turn around and I'm about 100 feet away from the table and I don't see Jacob. And I get closer, I'm 50 feet away and I don't see Jacob. And I scream at my husband across there's plenty of people. You're talking a county fair, thousands of people. And I'm like, where is Jacob? And he's like, oh my God. And we dropped everything and we go in different directions screaming. And I'm sure as all the mothers out there are listening, this is your biggest fear. And things like this happen all the time. So he's gone. So a police officer comes up to me within seconds and says, did you lose your son? And I said, please tell me you have Jacob. And they said, yes, we do. He's over here. Oh. Okay, so what I'm feeling.
I got a runner on my hands.
Horrible. So I grab Jacob. I fall to the ground because I'm so elated. And then I take him back to my husband. And his friend was like, please don't be mad at him. I said, I am not mad at him. I said, accidents happen. I'm grateful that my son is okay. But I said, sweetheart, I need to ask you something. I said, were you playing this fishing game? And was Adina right next to you on the ground? And he said, yes. I said, okay, I need to walk away. And so I walked away. I almost threw up. I got very, very cold as ice. And I turned around and I broke down crying to him. I said, I don't know what to do with this. I said, I don't know if this is just a mother's instinct or what these visions are or anything. I said, well, I actually do know what it is, but I said, I don't know how much time I have, if I have seconds or if I have minutes or what it is. And what do I do with this information? And he said, well, let's just treat your visions as gospel. And I said, and he says, but don't take advantage of it. Yeah. So I said, sweetheart, I said, let me tell you something. I said, the jeweler down the block has a beautiful diamond ring. And if I don't get it, something bad's going to happen. So yeah, it's been, so things like that there, I think when, for whatever reason, whatever happened, just initiated something in my body. And now I see things a little more clearly, things that I believe have always been there. I just see them because there was enough quiet around at one point in my life to take note of it.
Mm-hmm. Monica, I don't mean to dominate. If you have a question or a comment for Stephanie, please chime in at any point.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I also wanted to say, so Stephanie, you didn't, you are Jewish, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Pick that up from the book. But you weren't, it doesn't sound like prior to this experience, you were a terribly religious, spiritual sort of person. Is that right? Am I getting that right? That you weren't real?
Look, I went to parochial school when I was younger, and, we went to temple on the high holidays, and, I produced at one point in my life Jewish educational documentaries. And you know, when I was younger, I, you know, dabbled in being more religious, but no, at the time all of this happened and years past, I was not religious. I was an educated Jew, but not an observant Jew, if that's a fair point to point out. And as far as spiritual is concerned, it's interesting because I had made friends with a cranial sacral therapist, and I don't know if you're familiar with that kind of chiropractics, but they do work. So they do work where they're barely even touching your body, but they're almost recalibrating things with touch, and it's very light touch. And at one point it got me very sick, and I said, how is that happening with you just touching certain pinpoints? And, you know, and they explained it. And then I met this Taoist priest from China who was like a Mr. Miyagi. You know, I saw a woman twist her knee and it was swollen and it was bruised, and I watched him do this and put his hands on her, and she could walk immediately afterwards and the swelling was gone. So I said, what is that? I want to learn that. And so I was acknowledging later in life, I mean, mid to late 20s, early 30s, that there was an energy out there, that there were people that were healers that had certain abilities, but it wasn't a religious thing. I think it was more of a spiritual experience. And I thought it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't believe that all religion encompasses the energy that we're giving off of our own bodies. You know, that static that you feel, that energy that you feel coming off of you is our molecules. There's a movement, there's an inertia attached with it and associated with it, and helping with that and understanding that help make me understand that that's part of the spiritual dimension.
Well, I would call myself an agnostic, and therefore I'm sort of skeptical but open. And, you know, reading your book, I kind of went into it, especially with the subtitle, Dying Revealed, Heaven's Help. I don't typically read books with Heaven's Help in the title.
Right.
Just not my type of thing, right? Because I'm thinking...
It was definitely an argument. Yeah, it was definitely an argument with the publisher. I was like, why do we need to put that in the tagline? Right.
But when I got to the parts, I guess, plural, where you talk about in kind of being met by your deceased loved ones that were sort of hanging out with you in that, whatever it was, the floating above your body, and kind of while you were in the coma and all, and even when you were dead, and then when you were in the coma, and you've got this, like your uncle and your grandmother. And I mean, it was very moving. And I wonder, like, how has that changed your outlook on spirituality and religion and all that stuff?
Well, I have a follow-up question to that too.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, let me ask you a question. Did it make you question your own agnostic perspective by reading all of it?
I would say it gave me hope, because I'm a hopeful agnostic. Like, I hope there's something out there. I hope that there are. And I'd like to think my grandma's is kind of looking out for me, but I don't know. But when the fact that you had that did give me hope, it made me feel optimistic and hopeful, and it was touching.
Got it. So yes, it has changed me forever. I am married to a PhD economist from University of Chicago. I don't believe you can get any more linear than that, truly, because he was so perplexed at the whole process that he tried to compartmentalize the premonitions because he had no answer, and none of the doctors could give him an answer. And how was it that 6 very detailed premonitions came true? Something that's so far-fetched, right? And statistically speaking, less than 0.5% would all come true. So he's had a very hard time with that. The experience of the floating, for a long time, when I did the regression therapy, going back into those moments, I did think, is this wishful thinking? These are people that I love very much, and this would be what they would be wearing. This is what they would be seeing because this is how I remember them, or this is what they would be, or whatever. That's fine. I'll give everybody that. And I can only tell you what I saw. But when I tell you that the people that I saw that I did not know, and the details to those things that there's no way I could have had a good guess, and that continue to happen, there, even if you want to say somebody's giving off an energy that, oh, it's a grandmotherly energy that the person is there. And so maybe you could guess, oh, your grandmother has passed away because the person you're talking to is 60 years old, and it's likely that their grandmother has passed away. The fact that there were certain details that were of their lives that I did not know 20 or 30 years ago before I even knew them, it's taken me aback in a very serious way, because I've tried to, and especially when I still keep getting certain visions or see things. The other day, Jacob was in my bed and Jonathan was away at work, and it was 2:00 in the morning, and he sat up and he said, "Mommy, who's that?" And I said, "That's Uncle Marvin." And I saw him, but it's just part of my everyday happening. So I just don't talk about it. And he's 2, and he looks exactly where he is, and he says, "Hi, Uncle Marvin, what you doing?" Having a conversation with him. And so I believe that we all have these layers of life in between and rationale, that there's no way possible that this could happen. Children have no filters. They have no reason to lie.
Right.
And they have no reason to make up what they're seeing. And I'm asking for certain things like, what does that look like? So there's no question in my mind what awaits us, and what's actually, and I'm writing a blog right now about the fact that what happens when we die from my perspective, but that the afterlife, that the afterlife runs in tandem with our current life. So it's just on a different dimension. And what I feel is the same thing that gave me the 3 months in advance notice that what was going to happen was given to me, as you've read in the book, was given to me as a heads up from loved ones that I've had in my life. Because how could I, I'm trying, I'm like, doctors, please give me an example, give me a reason, give me something to go with, because it's driving me crazy. And I'd rather not have this, because there's more paranoia involved in feeling that this came out of my psyche, or this came out of a psychic ability, or this came out of, like, just give me something tangible so that I can chew on that, as opposed to, we have no idea.
So I will go with Susan and say that I'm probably a optimistic agnostic. I kind of like that, the way to say it. So my husband comes from a very Christian background. And I was raised Catholic, though it wasn't something that really stuck with me. After high school, it wasn't important. It's very important to them, so I do go to church every Sunday. I struggle a lot with the afterlife. And with thinking that there's a heaven and that there's anything going on. So, and I know that he comes from a very conservative church, so there's very strong opinions. Have you received any criticism from religious groups over this?
I've had certain people that are anti-Semitic. I've had certain people that have said things that I must have reinvented history, right? But no, I'd say the overwhelming majority, I would say 95%, because when I'm talking about the emails, the book just came out and we've just started doing on press and everything. And so the people that have reached out have really been people that are incredibly supportive, that are on the fence, skeptical, like, hopeful agnostics like yourselves. And it's interesting. A Harvard professor just recently reviewed my book, and I don't know it just blows my mind that people that are very, very linear in their thinking are totally, I can't say believing in it, but I'd say that they're very open to it and wanting to ask many, many more questions.
Well, yeah, because I would say I'm very linear too, so it's a hard concept to grasp what you're talking about.
I understand completely. And when you read the book, you'll see how my husband, I thought we were going to get divorced over this because once something like this happens, I am now forever changed. There's no way that I can look at the world, and probably your husband has a certain way of looking at the world because of how he was raised. Mm-hmm. So you probably have discussions where it's just frustrating and it's better to just agree to disagree, right?
100%.
So my husband, acknowledges certain aspects of the story. He's been a witness for the whole thing, but he couldn't plant his feet firmly on the ground. And so throughout the book, first of all, he wanted me to give the advance back. He was totally against me doing this. And I completely understand, because I was the one in the coma, but he was the one breathing and living every minute and every second, and realizing I told him this was going to happen. And so the guilt associated with that and everything else, and he was a rational thinker, so there's only so much he could have done. But for him, he was in crisis mode, and he just needed to just take care of the situation right then and there. Now that we were past it, he's like, crisis averted, let's go back to our lives. And now you're telling me you want to write a book? And by the way, you're telling me you see dead people? Like, what is going on? And so then I videotaped my hypnotherapy, because I wanted to remember I'd never been hypnotized before. And if you can't tell already in the 10 minutes we've been talking, I'm a little type A. So I wanted to understand everything that I was saying. And also, in case I was with somebody crazy that would make me dance around naked if they gave me a word or something like that. So he could look. You both are exactly like that. So when I showed him the start of the tapes, he slammed down my computer and he said, I do not want to watch it. I don't want to see this. And you see me in pain. You see me at the flatline moment. You see me in a seizure and convulsing. And it's pretty traumatic, but it was a relief to me. And when I started seeing things, a perfect example that I had was I saw his father. I'd never met his father. His father had died many, many years ago. And there was something specific that I had seen. Something so, like, it wouldn't even be a topic of conversation. I saw his father holding a coin. And the coin was not a U.S. coin. It was a foreign coin. And I described in detail what that coin looked like. I said, talk to me about a coin. What is the importance of the coin? Because the way that I get these visions are 3 to 5 seconds as visuals, but there's no audio involved in them. And he was wearing a certain type of jacket, and I was describing the jacket, and I was describing the threads, and I was describing the inlay, and there were so many details to it because it came very clear. And I didn't understand the message, because the message is left up to interpretation. You're seeing a video, but you're not having any audio. And because I don't know this person, it's just presenting itself like a little clip. And I went to every single person in the family, and everybody thought I was crazy. And my husband's like, tell my dad I said hi. He was just like, that's her. And it was breaking us apart, because here it is. I told him for months that I was going to die, and he didn't believe me. And then it happens, and I'm like, how do you not take me at my word now? I feel like you don't trust me. And so it didn't make a difference of anything else. I didn't care that anybody else believed or didn't believe, but this is my soulmate. And you're telling me that we think fundamentally different. I have a problem with that. And my therapist said, I feel like so like, hey, my therapist said, you don't have to think the same way. You have to understand that he's rooted in mathematics, and this is his way of dealing with things, and it's unemotional. And I said, I don't think you understand. I now see that there's an afterlife. And if I die, and I want to come back and haunt him, I want to make sure he knows that I am around. So, so, you know, I mean, I'm joking, but I'm half serious because this is my soulmate, and I'm in it with him in this lifetime and the next lifetime. And if you're telling me you don't think that way, so now what he did based on being the agnostic that he was, he said, he would ask questions. Well, how do we prove that this is true? Well, how do we prove this and that? And so I went to everybody in the family, and as you'll read in the book, I found the link and I understood the message clearly. And at that moment, when the message came out clearly, my husband had tears in his eyes and he said, I believe you. He said, and I look at him and I'm like, screw you for not believing me. I'm like, so yeah.
Well, when you said that you had the vision about at the county fair, and that afterwards he said, we're going to take these as gospel, that sounds like he made a big,
huge progress. Huge.
And honestly, I mean, props to him, because he provided a great foil for your story. Your story's great because he's the skeptic.
Absolutely.
And you're trying to like put it all together. You're doing the videos, you're talking to people, you're interviewing doctors, all to show him. And so he's sort of like the reader, right? I'm the reader. And I'm like, how can I refute this?
You got it.
No option to refute this.
You've got it 100%. You know, I say to him all the time, I said, if they make a movie of this, he's the hero. Because he is
Gotta make a movie of this.
Yeah.
This is a movie. Oh.
So yeah, so he's like, what are you talking about? I said, you're the hero. He's like, so you mean by me not agreeing with you this whole time and not believing in you made a better book? And I said, you know what? It did, but I don't thank you through all that process and that stress and everything. It would have been much easier just in there.
So speaking of writing the book, we have a published author joining us. Actually, it's Sarah, who's one of our contributors. She didn't really want to be on video, but she does have a question.
Okay.
Says she wants to know about the process of writing the book. Did you work closely with an editor? How long did it take to write it? All that kind of stuff. And I don't think she's aware that you co-wrote it with your cousin. So maybe
Correct.
You can talk a little bit about that.
So in the beginning, I had met with an agent, and the agent said, if you want me to represent you, you need to write it. And this was 7 months postpartum. So my story had gone viral around the 6.5 mark. We had told a local CBS Chicago station the story. And then the very next day it was on Yahoo at the cover page, and then it went crazy afterwards. And so the agent said, it's an interesting story. I don't know if it's a book, but you need to write it. And I said, well, don't you have a ghostwriter for this stuff? Because I know how to talk about it, but I'm 7 months postpartum. I'm lucky that I'm standing here talking to you. And he said, if you want me to represent you, you need to write it. So I started writing it. And it was a hard process. My cousin, who is an Emmy award-winning journalist, said to me at one point, she said, if you need help with this, I will collaborate with you. And I said, great, because I don't think I can handle this all on my own. And what was great is because she's known me my whole life, she would ask me questions about my past and my life that we tied in and layered it, which was great. Anybody else that would have helped me with this, and because she's a journalist, she interviewed me in different phases while we were writing. So the process to write the book took about, the narrative at least, was about 8 months. And then we submitted it. No, maybe it was a little bit, well, let me see. So we started the writing maybe in February, March, maybe a little earlier. And it happened pretty quickly. And as I was creating drafts and submitting it to the agent, I said, when are we done? Like, I take direction well, tell me what I need to do, what's not. I've never written a book before. Just tell me what to do. And he's like, you write an outline, then from the outline, you get a narrative, write a narrative. And it was one thing after another. And he didn't use an outline. And he said, okay, use the narrative. And so we get that done. And in the interim, I started doing regression therapy. So we submitted the narrative, and he was happy with the narrative, but I was getting rejected left and right. At one point, one of the publishers, which will remain nameless, said she didn't die long enough to make it compelling.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was one rejection. Yeah. Exactly. That was a harsh rejection. So it was one thing after another. And I'm like, well, what does it take? A minute, 2 minutes? We go.
What's your bottom line?
Yeah, exactly. I'll work harder next time. So we get to, I start regression therapy, and I guess by my 10th hour of regression, all of this stuff starts coming out, and the videos are very traumatic and everything. And I send one to my agent. I said, you won't believe this. And I send it to him, and then I tell him what the doctor said after watching it. And he's like, Stephanie, I'm pulling this narrative. You write that. Yeah. And I was grateful that my cousin was involved in the process, because there's no way I could transcribe those regression sessions that soon after delivering Jacob. And I was going back in for a massive surgery, 11 months postpartum.
Oh.
And so it was for fixing everything that they did. I mean, they were worried originally about saving my life, and the second time or the fourth surgery was fixing all the hernias and everything from that. But that the process itself was hard. When I finally signed the contract with HarperCollins, which was, I had written maybe 70 pages of the narrative. When we got an editor from HarperCollins, he read the narrative and just broke it down chapter by chapter, but he didn't do any kind of overhaul. We finished the book 2.5 weeks later. So it was and it wasn't like I needed to do a massive amount of research, because I was telling my story, which was good. But it was a very painful process reliving it, because it was so fresh. But I knew if I could get it on paper, because it happened so recently, that it would have more of an impact if it was out there. So people that had experienced any kind of trauma, they could see how far they could come if they could go through this process. And the writing was very, very therapeutic for me.
Monica, I know you have written about your childbirth on your blog. Monica writes for our blog, but she also has her own blog, Redefining Mom. Can you talk about what that was like for you and kind of compare, maybe?
Well, I definitely didn't die, so it wasn't certainly doesn't seem as horrific after. Although I didn't realize at the time that I had some form of postpartum going on after. So basically, what happened to me is I was in labor for 72 hours. I fell under this thing called a laborist model, which in hindsight, when you talked about like patient advocacy, I wish I knew better. My sister kind of encouraged me not to go with it, but I was really overwhelmed during my pregnancy, and I just kind of felt like I've had this OB forever, so I'm just going to stick with her. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but essentially every 12 hours at the hospital, the shift changed. They wanted to treat me different. I'm immune to Pitocin apparently. So I was up to the max 3 times. They manually dilated me. I was gushing blood. Then they were like, oh, I want to send you home. And it got to the point where I had to demand a C-section because it just was not a good situation. So I got on the table and I lost too much blood and I lost consciousness. There's pictures of me in the recovery where I'm just white as a ghost. And I remember vaguely about an hour, I could hear her screaming, and I looked over at my husband and I said, don't ever make me do this again. I felt like I thought I was going to die. And then after, I didn't have a hard time bonding with her, but I cried. As soon as he left when I was on maternity leave, I just sobbed for hours. And I didn't tell anyone. Like, he didn't even know. I don't know why I didn't tell anyone, because I'm really vocal, which that kind of bothers me. And then about a year and a half later, and I was terrified of ever having another baby. And a year and a half later, he was, let's have another kid. And I was like, no, please, I'm not ready. He's like, but you promised they'd be close together. And we ended up seeing a therapist too. Now, mind you, we were very clear when we were together, like we wanted 2 kids, and like, so he was just like by the book, like this is what, and so I was like, I cannot do this. And so we saw a therapist, and they brought up this concept of post-traumatic birth to me. And when I went home and Googled it, I was like, wow, that is me to a T. And then once I could understand what it was I was going through, it made it so much easier for me to cope with it. So I'm still terrified to have another kid, but I definitely am more open to it now.
And you understand the impact that it had on you going through that process. And Stephanie, I know you had that period sort of like after you came out of your coma and you kind of physically mostly recovered, you had that just tremendous sense of, would you call it depression? Would you call it PTSD?
So apparently they call it, first of all, Monica, that is unbelievable. And for you to have undergone all that, and especially being as vocal as you are, you're a perfect example of, here it is, the strong, very strong-willed woman that in this environment, you just figure everybody's doing what they can. You're in pain. You're hoping the baby's going to be fine. And you're in the most vulnerable position of your life. Yeah. And yet you are not going to speak. For some reason, something's suppressing the voice. And to me, that is the most important time, because for obvious reasons, you just don't, I get when you're in that environment, the doctor should know better. They should be treating me. I'm their patient, especially if you have a relationship with your OB. Nothing's going to happen. This person knows me. They're friendly with me. They're friends with me, whatever. And you're absolutely right. Once you start seeing the process and what they're saying, they're treating the symptoms and they're not treating you as a patient. They're not. I hope telling friends that are pregnant and what you're telling future people that want to get pregnant, that it, had you spoken up, maybe you wouldn't have been 72 hours in that.
That's probably the biggest thing I wish in hindsight, I don't regret it.
Right.
But moving forward, like I lost too much blood, and they actually took 36 hours to get me a blood transfusion, which caused me a lot of lasting problems.
Absolutely.
And I call it the ocean in my head. Even when they sent me through neurology and just everything. They even told me, if it wasn't so bad that they treated me wrong, my daughter was 7'8" when she was born, and 2 days after she was born, she went down to 6'4", and they told me she lost 2 ounces. My pediatrician came in panicked, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And it was really bad care all around, and I can't understand why. That bothers me more than anything. And when I finally got a new OB, she thought I was there just to get an annual, and I was actually there to talk to her about having another kid and like all these issues. And she didn't know, and I just broke down, and she was like, "Oh, okay." And the reason I broke down was because I felt like no one would listen to me about this. Like, I'm not crazy. It was awful.
Yeah.
And she's like, she just reassured me that their practice was so much different. And I sympathize with you.
Yeah, but there's nothing worse in the world to feel like you're not being listened to, right? That's the hardest part. Even if you're screaming at the top of your lungs, even though they think you're crazy or they know better, you stop everything. Because doctors I've spoken to and lectured with and had, speaking engagements, they're like, we ask the patients to tell us because you know your body better than they do. And so there are certain things that you're feeling. So it's their job to listen, because that information is valuable. What my anesthesiologist said is the patient is telling you what's wrong.
Yeah, they definitely didn't listen to me at all.
Susan, to answer your question, the immediate delivery, when I woke up from the coma, anesthesiologists will tell you that the way you go into anesthesia is the way you come out of it. And because I was so petrified, the way that I came out of it was angry. I was already on kidney dialysis and everything, so it was huge. So I looked down at my swollen belly and I'm like, am I still freaking pregnant? You know, I was angry and like holding on to dear life. And so I forgot that there was a baby involved in this story. Here it is at day 8, you do a bris, right? A circumcision. And people were coming in and the miracle mom and all of these things. As a teaching hospital, there was one team after another just coming in telling me how lucky I was to be alive, which wasn't helping my recovery. And the more that I learned about AFE, and I didn't learn a lot in the very first few weeks, you know, everybody tried to keep that information away from me.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, I guess you'll call it depression or acute stress disorder. They tell you that after it gets past a 6-month mark, it turns into PTSD. So I had trouble bonding with Jacob. It's the hardest part. Out of everything I've written down in the book, the hardest part was to admit what I admitted in the book and how I felt about it in the very beginning. And then when the 6-month mark came, and Monica, this therapy might actually help you as I'm thinking about it. I needed to stop crying when I went to Starbucks to get a cup of coffee and say, you don't realize this, but this conversation might have never happened and you might not have given me my coffee because I was dead, you know, and those kind of realities really were hard. And I couldn't look at the world the same way. And so I don't know whether it was a depression as much as a post-trauma, because I couldn't look at the everyday occurrences, the mundane, without looking at it as a miracle that I could pick up the phone, as a miracle that I could act. Like when I finally came up, and to this day, I am off of dialysis, and I thank God every time I urinate, because in the hospital, the patient transporters and nurses, we take it for granted, but the nurses would measure it and be like, it's okay, we'll keep trying, because every time I couldn't meet that measurement, that meant another dialysis session, another 4 hours, another, and another, that port was not coming out of my chest. And so the regression therapy, which is what I'm getting to regarding Monica, is that the regular post-trauma therapy I did with a traditional therapist helped me get over the trauma in a way to say, and not get over it fully, but to say, we need to put it in perspective to a certain extent and realize that, because I was saying, well, I dodged a bullet. That's what I would say, I dodged a bullet. And one therapist, after like the 4th therapist or something, said, you didn't dodge a bullet. The bullet hit you dead on. You survived the bullet. And when I put it that way, it was like I wasn't disconnected with the elephant in the room. I was respecting it and I acknowledged it. And then I said, okay. And I went to every therapist and I interviewed people and I said, now somebody needs to tell me how it is I saw everything before I saw it. And everyone with all the big letters and names behind their names said, I don't have an answer for you with that, but let's just deal with the trauma. And I said, see, that is a big traumatic factor for me, because if I have another premonition, what am I supposed to do with that information? How am I going to not take it seriously? Or am I going to take it so serious that I'm going to get crippled? And what if I'm driving my children, or I couldn't drive for the longest time, but what if I'm walking in a stroller and I freak out and the stroller gets away from me? Like, what? I needed to deal with it. So so the regression, what she did, and by the way, I did it over video chat. I did not go into the office. Yeah, I did over video chat.
I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah. I did some of it in her office, but the majority of it was over video chat. And so you see me in the headset like this and whatever. But I think probably because I was in the safety of my home, I didn't think I'd get hypnotized. And so because it was so safe and easy, like it happened very quickly. But what I would tell Monica and what I would tell other women and men who have been through severe trauma like this. And Monica, you have been through severe trauma to be, contemplating about what the pregnancy is and the trepidation behind your voice and what I'm hearing outside of just okay, so we're going to talk about having kids, and your husband thinking one way and you thinking another way, the butterflies in your stomach and the fear that goes behind the words. What if you are determined to have another child, what the regression therapy will do is it will take you back, as painful as it is of what you've gone through. It will take you back to those moments, which is not a pleasant experience. Believe me, I completely understand. It's re-traumatizing to a certain extent. However, when you go back into those moments, they are very clear that this had already happened to a part of you. And you are sitting here doing this therapy, healed, surviving it, and stronger. And you are going back to discover what was the weakest, most vulnerable part of you. And you are going back to help that Monica that was laying in the hospital bed. And when you can go back to those moments, whether you're the hopeful agnostic, whether you're a believer, whether you're into the therapy, whether you're not, you're going back into those moments, reframing that experience so that you can take it at a level 2 instead of a level 10 and say, okay, this is what happened. This will never happen to me again because I have a voice and I will have a patient advocate standing next to me. Even if I lose my voice, there will be somebody that knows my birthing plan. There will be somebody that knows the history and what I'm afraid of and who will talk to me through this process. And then you will be stronger because of it, and you won't have the issues that you had the first time around. It will be an uneventful delivery.
That's what I would like. That's probably what I'm concerned about the most is having the voice and having them listen to me, because I feel like the medical profession sometimes can make you feel like you're crazy. Right. And or just like you don't know what you're talking about, it's fine, and they blow you off, and it goes against everything of how I am that I even. Right. It kind of boggles my mind, actually, the way it ended up playing out, that I was so quiet, even to the point where when the hospital called me, they didn't discharge me properly either, of course, because they were a train wreck. Mm-hmm. They're also a teaching hospital. Mm-hmm. When they called me, they kept telling me every single patient gets a follow-up survey. When they called me to check in on me like 3 days later, I started telling the person on the phone, well, this happened and this happened. What do you know? The follow-up survey never showed up. Now, ordinarily, I would have been all over that. Like, where is my follow-up survey? I got a lot of things to say. I didn't even fight the bill that came. I think they overcharged me like a lot. I didn't even fight that. I paid it off. I just actually finished paying it off. She's going to be 3 on Saturday. And I just...
But you don't know why?
I just couldn't deal with it.
Right. Well, it's more than that. You just wanted it to go away.
Yeah.
Because
I didn't want to relive it. It's really weird.
Absolutely. The more you talked about it and get frustrated and your heart starts to palpitate again and you start stressing out over it, you're taking me back to those memories. What I'm telling you is to go, you in control of you, to go back into those memories and reframe it for yourself. Don't let other people or your apprehensions around making that phone call to the hospital or that survey take control over that situation. You take control over that situation, because if you're determined to have another child, you're not going to want to be fearful the entire pregnancy. It's not good for you. It's not good for the baby. It's not good for your family. And you will resent your husband, and you will have an issue with your 3-year-old and all of that dynamic around, because the energy that you give off is still an energy and everybody can pick up on it. So wouldn't it be better to go right into the fire, and you're not for the first time, you go into the fire and you use your voice and you discuss it and you deal with it how you're able to deal with it. You get through the fire on the other side of the fire and say, okay, now I'm ready to go to battle. And the likelihood of anything else happening is slim to none, because you will be prepared.
Yeah. Even the doctors, one of the stats I thought was very interesting my new OB, when I was talking to her and I was just crying and I'm like, why am I even crying? She said that only 1% of women who have C-sections even need a blood transfusion. And then it kind of struck me like, okay, this was really not normal.
No.
This was a very abnormal experience that I had. And they almost treated me in the hospital like, man, this, happens. You look like, on the recovery table. It's totally normal not to be able to feed your infant and stuff, not be able to respond to her. Apparently that's not normal.
No, it's most certainly not normal. But you don't want to relive it. So like, why are you going to argue it? Just get you the heck out of the hospital.
Right.
And you never want to see those people again. Right. But if, like I said, if you are determined to bring a second child into the world, the only way you can make that space is to be in a very happy space. And that is for your entire family. But you need to take control over it.
That's very helpful.
You're like our new therapist. So I'm going to hire you to be our new therapist. You're amazing. But we have very little time left. This conversation has flown by, but I just want to ask one last question, which is, what is next? Like, what is the next thing for you? But I mean, obviously promoting this amazing book, but then beyond that, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be?
I'm getting, so when I started writing the book, can you hear me? I don't know whether it's coming in clear. Is it clear?
I can hear you. Sure.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. When I started writing the book, I started writing for very selfish reasons. So one of the reasons that I wrote the book was to feel better, writing a blog, putting things out, and just to have those moments of just release. So I did feel better. And then as I was writing it, and as I was talking to people about writing the book and what the story was, when I would just talk to people, just out and about, they were really affected by it. And since finishing the book, random people from all over the world, from Tokyo, from Canada, from South Africa, people have been reaching out saying, this has affected me and this is why, and they've never read a near-death experience with all the documentation behind it and just all these things, which was right. and how they've learned to speak up for themselves, and that they're going to use me as an extreme example. And so I want to continue doing, I sit on the board of the AFE Foundation. I want to continue promoting and talking about amniotic fluid embolisms, because even though it is somewhat unpredictable and unpreventable, with more research, I think they will nail it down and we'll be able to do something and change some protocol in the hospital. I'm working with the American Society of Anesthesiologists. It was their campaign last year in 1 second count, and letting people know that the options they have available to them and how important anesthesia is, because many people don't realize that anesthesiologists are there as physicians and hold your life in their hands. So I will continue to do education, advocacy, awareness, and letting people know that they need to speak up. And it's not to scare anybody, but it's to take control over it, because what's the worst case that could happen? What's the worst case scenario? You're wrong? Okay, I would have loved to have been wrong. But what if you're right? It's not worth staying quiet if it could save your life.
Awesome. Well, our time is up, my friends. Please get this book. It is awesome. And like I said, I read it in about 1 day. It's a very, very fast read. And I think we lost you for a second. There, you're back. And visit stephaniearnold.net.
Hello.
Keep an eye out for Stephanie to appear on some very important and major national programs. And I can't wait till the movie comes out. I really can't.